The Samurai will return March 11th. Watch.
Everybody got their recordings?
Yep.
Could you start off by telling us what finally led it to become a reality that Samurai Jack would come back?
Well, I think it's, I finished Hotel Transylvania 2. I was looking for other work. I was a little burnt out. And in the 12 years, it's, we've done 5 different studios to try to develop a movie, and never really going anywhere. And then after, the last one was at Sony, and it wasn't going anywhere, and they just released it. And then I was waiting to, get the next project going, and then I thought, maybe I'll just put it out there and see if there's a bite from Cartoon Network, and to see if they'll be interested in doing it, So I sent a little email to Rob Sorcher, and Rob's like, oh, this is a great idea. Let me pass it along to Lazo, because we don't, Cartoon Network ends at 8 o'clock now. And so he sent it to Lazo. Mike called me the next day. We talked. And what's interesting is not one time did anybody ask me what the story is, which was great. And then they said, within 2 weeks we had a deal. And all of a sudden, and I was just doing it as like an exploratory, just to see if, and then I guess the universe was ready for it. And then,
Yeah, you got a job.
And then within 2 weeks we started. That was, so I finished in August, like September, October. It was around that time.
2016?
Of 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of 16 we made it.
Right.
So when you came into this season, did you have the end in mind? And so did all your episodes work toward that end?
Yes, I've had this ending in mind since 2008.
So what is it?
Well, let me tell you. And it's this, once you get into, you guys have seen the first 2 episodes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So once you get into the middle of the season, you start to realize, wait, it's going here. And it's something that I've wanted to do animation for a long time, but it's really hard for me because I want to do it right. And I want to do it that you really feel it. And I think what's great about these 10, and it's the same story that I've had for a long time, is to have Jack go through this thing that you're really going to feel for him, and you're going to feel for the situation. And that's the thing is, as filmmakers, the best thing we could do is have an audience have genuine emotion. Laughing is for sure the one side of it, but the emotion is the other side. And so, and those are the 2 really difficult things. I've always said it's easier to get a laugh than to get true emotion. Because you can do a fart joke and people laugh. That's pretty. That's day one. But then to get people to really feel, and so that's what we're trying to do. But yeah, I've had the story for a while, different variations.
What I was going to ask is that because just the description that you gave, it seems like it's very, like you had the end in mind, like there's going to be a very regimented procedure towards the end of it.
Yep.
But the episodes that I had the most fun watching when I was like 10 were like the really experimental ones, like The Blind Archer was my favorite episode.
Yep.
Are there going to be any like weird situations like that where it's basically this one task, like getting across a football field of snow to this tower?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were super conscious of that because that's one of our favorite episodes too.
Mm-hmm.
Blind Archers, Zombies, Birth of Evil, like all those, Jack's memories. It's these. What for me the magic of Jack is the simplest idea, but then we have full half hour to execute it to the nines. Rather than doing that was like one of the frustrating things was when I was working with JJ on the movie. He goes, well, it's got to have 9 twists and turns. And that's kind of, it's for him, that works
That's how
really
he
well.
done it.
In all his movies, you could tell kind of have that. But I'm like, but that's so not Jack.
Yeah.
You can have one, and then you have the whole thing to really explore it. So anyway, so with this, we wanted to have those moments. And so there's definitely episodes that feel like that. But what the biggest thing is, because we're telling one story, it's going to feel more like a sequence. Or sequences, rather than a whole episode where he's got to learn to, see with his ears.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that idea is definitely throughout.
Yeah, because Genndy was talking earlier about how in the old series, you had to make each episode a standalone and come back to zero at the end because that was the network's mandate. Like, we want to be able to put this wherever we want, however we want. Nowadays, in the age of Netflix, stories are ongoing. People look at a whole season of a series as a thing.
Like a movie in
Right,
parts.
like a big movie.
Yeah, it's always, it's always a movie. They want you to sit down, they want you to binge watch. That's the thing, And so the best thing to do it is like the old school serial way. Like, you get the woman, damsels tied to the railroad tracks, and here comes the train cut. Like you'll see
next week.
Yeah, they're doing away with main title sequences. And it's, the audience is impatient. Like, you gotta get to the next. It's like a drug, really. We gotta get to the next episode to see what happens. And it's cool as an audience to watch that. But Jack is a little bit more about taking its time, and we're the opposite of that. And so I think our filmmaking sped up a little bit, but it's still much calmer than anything else out there.
Does that worry you at all as a creator?
It does. I mean, when I do one of these really slow pans, where it's just, I get nervous, but I know all I got is my instinct, and if I don't trust it, that's like going through the whole feature process. That's all I had in fighting. It's just why it's in my gut, it feels wrong, and I've gotten this far on my gut, and you hired me because of my gut and everything that I've done, so that's all you have. And, look, we've been doing this for 30 years almost now, and so it's, at some point you gotta trust it, and I've made mistakes too, so along the way. So it does make me nervous, but at the same time, I know we're doing something of quality, and I trust all of our opinions too. So you have to believe in yourself, otherwise you're gonna be running in circles. Especially with the internet, where you can put something out and you can have, thousands of people's opinions. You have to have your own, and then hopefully if you're honest, because as soon as I start listening to you guys, it's over.
Yeah, you can't ask somebody else's opinion on your story.
Right.
Because they don't know your story. And if he was like, well, I think it should do this, like, well, then go tell your story.
Yeah.
You want to watch mine? Sit down and shut up.
And this has been the most interesting experience, because so when Jack premiered, the internet was just taking off, right? Like, there was not a lot of talkbacks and stuff, And then now, of course, it's huge reactions, which is great. But at the same time, it's the first time we've ever done anything. And Star Wars was a little different because it was not ours, and it was already a fan base, and it's just a different medium, a different way to tell the story. But people have preconceptions, right? You watched it as a kid.
Yeah.
Now, what your idea, what the new ones are going to be, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, like, no, but you were saying before that, like,
Yeah.
the pacing of it is part of the draw, because, like, I can't remember if it was it was the second episode. It was like when he was going through the forest or whatever, and there's a scene where you just look at like leaves coming off of the tree,
Oh, right.
and like you like that there's time for that, but then it's also like it. Well, I'm saying it feels familiar.
Okay. But so we have to deal with people's preconceptions, and the way you imagine it when you were a kid, I could never live up to. Like I was telling Phil a story where, as a kid I grew up on, Scooby-Doo and Dynamite and Hong Kong Phooey, all these old Hanna-Barbera shows. And I loved them, it got me into animation. And then I got to Hanna-Barbera, and it was the vault of all the stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch some Dynamite and some Hong Kong Phooey. And I put them in, and they were horrible. It's just the worst. There's no kung fu fighting in Hong Kong Phooey. And it was just, and Scatman Brothers, what?
Right.
And it was terrible, and I realized I had to stop watching it because I was killing my childhood. Because in my head they were so good,
Yeah.
and so I was really nervous about going into it with this. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna ruin this show for everybody that loved it, because you can't live up to people's expectations.
Well, the thing is, you can't recreate it. Did I ever tell you this? We did the Pee Wee Herman show. I did played Cowboy Curtis, and he brought back the original Pee Wee Herman stage show, but he was folding in stuff from the TV show into the stage show that he had done beforehand. So he was creating that playhouse for the stage. It had never existed for stage.
Right.
That was a single camera thing.
Right.
So, and everybody who watches, oh my God, it's exactly like I remember it. And it was exactly like they remembered it, but it wasn't exactly the
But it
same.
wasn't, right. And that was the thing, like, like I talked out there a little bit, where Jack's drawn a bit different. And to us, we were nervous about it, because it's, it's precious to us, because we were happy with what we did. That was the big difference. It's not like we shit it out and then we're like, well, we're just gonna make it better. Like, it worked, and we're here because it worked, and now we have to change it because we're 12 years separated from it. It's a darker story tone that's really gonna drive it, and so are people gonna hate it because it's different but the same, just like what Phil's story was. And so far it seems like it's, from the reaction just from the trailer has been really positive, so.
Yeah, because if you gave them the exact same thing, it wouldn't respond.
Yeah, that's why, like, I got in my head a little bit about preconception. Now, should I make it exactly the way people watched it? Or am I gonna figure out what your preconception of it was when you were a kid watching it, or as an adult? And then, and then I just stopped and I go, this is the way I'm drawing right now from all these influences, and I'm gonna I'll just guide Jack along this direction.
So Genndy, how has for you after over a decade of working on this, how's the character changed for you? And for Phil, how has the character changed for you as well, coming back voicing it so much later?
Well, for me, it's the best thing about it is we get to really dive into Jack a lot more. Where before it was a little simpler, we didn't really go into the huge weight of what his mission is, and now it's all about that. It's 50 years. He hasn't succeeded, and so if your sole mission is to do this one thing and you can't do it, and you can't find a way to do it, where are you going? And so figuring that out was really exciting for me.
Yeah, and I would say the same. Getting to cover new ground with a character that I really do love, that I really have a strong affection for, and getting to do more with it, is amazing. And it's funny that you were talking about the going deeper with him, because before I was playing the hero, and the almost invulnerable hero. Like, he was to the point where, like, you go into a comic book shop and it's like, all right, who will win in a fight? It's pretty much always Jack. Well, no, he would cut Iron Man's armor completely off, because of the fact of his training, and things didn't affect it. But yeah, the one thing he can't fight is time. And to play, how that is affecting him, even with all his training and the amazing heart that he's got, how does it change him? That's been the fun for me.
And one of the things also, there's this, I think it's in Dr. No, the old Sean Connery James Bond. There's a scene where he's sleeping and then they put a tarantula in his bed, right? And then you see James Bond sweat, right? And it was such a little thing, but it shows the humanity, because a lot of times in these movies, the villains, like Vin Diesel, like, he doesn't sweat, like, he's got it, or The Rock, he's got it covered, right. But when I saw that scene, it always affected me, because I'm like, wow, this is real. Or later on, I think it was Roger Moore was running up the steps and he was breathing heavy. He was winded, and it's these, like, our world is such a cartoon in the movies, like, right, especially with CG, one thing is, is crazier than the next, and it's completely unbelievable. But then that reality of running up the steps and breathing, like we all do, heavy, makes it so real, or James Bond sweating. And so with Jack now, I think in the first 52 he was that. Now all of a sudden he's hurt, he's wounded, he's fucking losing his mind. It makes it all so much more interesting, and I think it makes him more human.
How has the 50 years changed Aku as well? Because he's in therapy.
That's right. Yeah. He is the
His midlife crisis.
He is exactly the same place that Jack is. He's lost hope of Jack ever going away, and it's this little gnat. So he's trying to ignore it, but he knows it's out there. So it's that thing that keeps rubbing him, and so he's also kind of lost his way a little bit, and he just kind of given up to a degree.
So sorry if I haven't watched both of the episodes, but one of the big recurring things is the fact that he doesn't have his sword. And that makes me think about the 20-issue comic run with Jim Zub and was it Adam Soriano?
Yeah,
Andy Soriano, yeah. And I was wondering, does that mean that we're gonna get to see the live animated version of The Tale of the Broken Blade, or?
No, so those comics are completely not canon, they're not approved or anything. We're doing a completely different thing that's with the show. I think that's, sometimes the comics are, it's kind of its own alternate universe.
Okay.
That's the way I think of it,
Okay.
And so, I think Andy did, a lot of good art and stuff, but it's not anything that I would do. I wanna make sure this is clearly its own thing,
Hmm.
We're at a 5-minute mark, so last couple questions.
You talked a little bit about your love of 2D.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've talked about that in the past, even coming to the CG world, that's really the sensibility that you brought to try and bend the CG to your will. Today's audiences, especially younger audiences, are their world is much more CG than it is 2D. Do you think that affects the audience in a way that it will change how they will accept a really stylized 2D show, or do you think it won't? It'll make it even stand out and be that much cooler because it is more the exception than the rule now.
That's a really good point. I think, it is the world, video games, movies, everything is the CG world, and it's getting more and more hyper real, right? And I think, to your point, I think 2D does stand out. And look, in my mind, if you make a 2D feature and a 2D CG feature, exactly shot for shot, which one is going to do better? Like in my mind, it might be equally separated. Like some people prefer hyper detail versus something more artistic. But in my mind, it's going to be 2D because it just has that extra element of somebody's point of view where CG is more, I don't know, just some of that's taken out. And so,
a little more clinical.
Clinical, yeah, and it makes everything more the same. And standing out, I think, is probably the best point. Is nothing stands out. From Moana to all these movies are so well crafted. But they all starting to look the same, right? Because the CG tool is great at mimicking reality. And so how do you want it to say? And look, some art director can pick a better color palette than another art director. It usually comes down to story. That's what really makes the difference. But I think for us, it's our signature.
Well, we've talked about it a lot, but I'm hoping that features gets to a point where a super cool 2D feature would stand out so much, like the movie 300.
Right.
Like it's a 2D feature, but instead of like in the past when they've been trying to bring back a 2D feature, it just looks like some cheap kids thing. It would have to be brought back
in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to be super cool, which is what we'd love to do. But I think we're getting to that point where the market is so saturated with CG features that all look the same.
But how do you convince?
Same theme, same formula. Yeah.
And unfortunately, look, features, it's a business. TV is too, but features is
Price point.
It's the price point is higher. We could do lower, but it's the potential. Like they explained it to me once because I was pitching low budget features in the beginning, and they go, look, Genndy, it's super competitive, right? And we've got 52 weekends, let's say, right? And each weekend there's 3 to 4 movies. Now we could put out your $10 million movie and we could make $60 million on it, which is a huge success. Or we could put out a $200 million movie and make $1 billion. Now, there's no guarantees they could lose that $200 million, but it's the roll of the dice, right? And so their calculations.
I think the up to bat analogy. You only get a certain amount of up to bats. They want everyone to be the biggest home run hitter they could put on.
And they're making maybe 15 movies a year.
Right.
That's why somebody makes it independent, and then they bring it to them, and then they have less stakes in the game, and then they can just put it up. It'll happen. I want to be us. I want us to do it. But we'll see.
I do think bringing back a 2D feature, it would seem to almost have to be adult. It would have to be, to get the, you know, it
Yeah.
would have, it couldn't,
Well, that's
if
part of-
you
that's
tried
part
to
of the
do
cool
a
thing.
children's or a family,
It's not cool.
it would go, oh, you're doing that. That was the 80s.
Yeah, it has to
would
feel.
have to be like the Matrix. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's badass.
It's gonna.
you know?
It has to feel like
Right.
you haven't seen it before.
Right.
That's correct. And in this day and age, that's getting harder and harder.
Next time, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.